Good morning. It's good to see each of you here this morning. We have visitors with us. You honor us by your presence today, and we hope you want to be back with us at your first opportunity. We've had some folks been out sick, back with us today. We're glad you're back with us, and I pray that your continued health. Encourage you to be with us tonight. Brother Jake Lockhart is our Sunday evening speaker this evening, and Jake's a student from Tech, and he's been here a couple of times before already. We always try to encourage young men as they want and desire to do the Lord's work. And so a good presence here tonight be a big encouragement to him. So let's have a good presence here tonight. Brother Charles read this morning from John chapter 8, 12 through 20. And that's our lesson text this morning. And we're really going to spend some time talking about this concept of the light of the world. Put it in context. If you're with us last Sunday night, you sort of knew where we were, but for those of you who weren't, going to bring you up to speed in John. The Feast of Tabernacles has been taking place. It's a long 7-day feast. It's over. It's Sunday morning. Jesus is in the temple. Probably in the common area of the temple, the court of women, because John tells us later it's where the treasury is, and that's where the treasury was kept, in the court of women. And so it's Sunday morning. The mom had brought a sinful woman to Jesus, caught in the very act of adultery, they say. What do we do with her? And they said the law says that she should be stoned. Of course, we sort of unpacked all that. What the law said is she and the man she was with should be stoned. But he wasn't there with her. Then Jesus said, leaning down on the ground, began writing the ground. We don't know to this day what he wrote. When we get to heaven, we can ask him. But finally, they kept insisting, wanting an answer for him, and he says, let the first person without sin cast the first stone. And then John tells us that they left, from the oldest to the youngest, walked away. And then Jesus asked her, woman, where are your accusers? And she said, there are none. He says, neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. And so we sort of looked at what that meant. Sometimes we look at people and say, well, it sounds like Jesus being pretty soft on sin. No, he's not. He's just underscoring the fact that we can't fix our past sins. Only Christ can. Only He can speak to those. Now, we can make amends for wrongs we've done, but we can't undo those sins. Only Christ can take care of those. And so we looked at that, and we read verse 12, and I said we would sort of pick up with that theme in our next lesson. That's where we're at this morning. So He makes this announcement. I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. Sounds like an announcement He made in chapter 7, almost, when He says, I'm living water. He who drinks of me will never thirst again. You see, it's a really interesting time of the year. During the Feast of Tabernacles, there's a lot going on. One guy I read, he said, think of like a big campground meeting. He said if they had RVs, there'd been RVs everywhere, because it was camping for a week. All the men within 20 miles were supposed to go up to Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles. They lived out in these little booths they put up. And it was a 7-day celebration. There was feasting, celebration. There was that ceremony where they poured the golden pitcher of water around the altar. And on the last day, they added a container of wine. And that's what the context of Jesus says, I'm the living water. But there was another really sort of neat thing they did that week. Because they're commemorating the wilderness wanderings. And so it was sort of a neat thing. And the closest thing I can get to relate to you is the lighting of the Olympic flame. Outside the temple were 4 huge pillars. Huge, big tall pillars. They had to be climbed up to a ladder to get there. Okay? And the top of these pillars were really like big, huge flames. In the Feast of the Tabernacle, it was one of the times they lit these flames. They actually took 65 liters of oil to fill it up. So it was a young priest's job to carry 65 liters of oil to fill it up. That's over 32-liter bottles to fill up one of them. And they would fill these up during the Feast of the Tabernacles, and they would light them. Now, think about when it was. They didn't have ambient light at night. They didn't have street lights. They didn't have, all the electricity we got. Can you think about what Jerusalem was like? A pitch black city at night, except for maybe their little olive oil, and these four huge pillars of light. It was quite impressive. And they said the people would cheer and dance and make music under these lights. It was just a big festival, for them. It was something that was awe-inspiring. And in this context, Jesus sort of screams above the crowd and says, I'm the light of the world. You see what these four pillars were representing was something that they knew of from the Old Testament. Of course, they didn't think of the Old Testament. They thought they knew it from their Bible. And Jesus wasn't claiming that he was just any ordinary light. What he was really saying is what these things represent was the Shekinah, the glory of God. Remember in the Old Testament how the pillar of cloud by day and the fire by night, and how that followed the tabernacle wherever they went, and it led the children of Israel. When it stopped, they stopped. When it moved, they moved. It was the glory of God. And eventually when Solomon builds a temple, that smoke comes down from heaven and fills the temple so much that the priests can't even see what they're doing. They can't see their hand from their place, and they have to stop what they're doing for the smoke can clear. The Shekinah, the glory of God. And that's what Jesus says when he's not claiming to be any ordinary light. He says, I am the glory of God. I am the light of the world. I'm God's presence. I'm the glory of God. You know the story? Remember from Bible study class? You may have little paper cutouts of it. Of the pillar of flame at night and the cloud during the day. The presence of God. The glory of God. He is the visible presence of God. Oh, that's a big claim. That's a big claim. In fact, when Charles read, it said the people there, they didn't like what they heard. They said, listen, that's a pretty big claim you're making, young man. Who's your witnesses? Because under the Jewish understanding, no truth was verified unless there was two witnesses. In an illegal case, you had to have two witnesses. One wasn't enough to get you in trouble. One wasn't enough to convict you. It took two or more witnesses. Jesus says, me and my Father, we're the witnesses. In fact, who else was there to witness? Who else could attest to God's glory? Because they hadn't lived to see it. They didn't live in the days of Moses. They didn't live in the days of Solomon. They had not seen God's glory like that in a long, long, long time. In fact, Malachi, in the last part of Malachi, the last book before the 400 years of prophetic silence, it makes an allusion to a coming light. The only witnesses there could have been was Jesus and His Father. And they say, well, who is your Father? He says, well, if you're asking me that question, you don't know who I am. If you don't know me, you don't know my Father. See, Jesus is making a bold statement here. John, remember this is his gospel. In John chapter 1, he loves the light imagery. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Here we have Jesus, just within a short amount of time, He says, I'm the living water, and now He says, I'm the light of the world, and they still couldn't comprehend it. Because their heart was darkened. That's the sad thing about light, is that it can be darkened. Jesus warned about hiding your light under a bushel, right? You don't do that. In fact, many people in the world had really godly influences. Hugh Hefner, who sort of helped usher in the sexual revolution in his Playboy mansion, do you know he's a minister's son? Do you know that Joseph Stalin studied to be a priest? Mao Zedong was raised by missionaries, Christian missionaries. Light can be darkened. Negative influence can envelop it. Oh, true light's really true light. You can't change the character, but you can hide it. You can obliterate it. Most of us who've lived in any age have seen an eclipse, haven't you? How when the earth gets between the moon or the moon gets between the earth and the sun, how the moon or the sun can both be eclipsed. You're not changing the light. You're just darkening it. You see, in Exodus chapter 13, verse 32, there's an interesting statement in Exodus, the book of Exodus, when it says that He, that is God, did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire at night from before the people. See, God left it there. Sometimes, I get forgetful about that. I'm thinking that the manna every morning was enough evidence of God's presence, and the quail coming in, and get some quail every once in a while, and the water from rock. That was enough. But remember, there's a tabernacle there. There's a tent of meeting, God's presence, and God left the pillar there, and yet they forgot God. So we understand that there's something significant happening here. But this too becomes prophetic. Some people come along and they get to see it. It's amazing. Simeon was an old man. And he went to the temple every day hoping to see the Messiah. He hoped to see the promise of Israel. And I don't know, I imagine him tottering a little bit and old and maybe infirm with age. And he would get every morning, and I don't know what he had for breakfast, pickled fish or whatever. He'd eat his breakfast and he'd make it down to the temple. And he would scan and look and scan and look and scan and look, looking for the hope of Israel. And then this day, this peasant couple comes in. They're poor. Their son's 8 days old. It's time to give God credit and glory for His birth. They come to the temple and he pulls out a few coins, and the father buys some doves to have sacrificed as required by law for his son. And the old man's eyes, even though dim with age, are clear enough to see the promise. Oh, he's not riding in on some steed. He's not royalty. He was born in a barn. And Simeon sees it. And he breaks out in joy. Lord, now you're letting your servant depart in peace, according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you prepared before the face of all the peoples, a light to bring revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of your people Israel. Oh, we all like babies here. This is the babyest loving congregation I've ever seen. I don't. Sometimes, if I didn't know who went with I couldn't figure out what baby went with. Because babies show up everywhere. Bela goes everywhere. When Dylan was little and I was preaching, of course, y'all sort of helped raise him. I'd be up preaching, I'd just see Dylan being passed, around as a baby being passed around as I preach. We love babies because we see so much potential in them, so much joy. And here old Simeon sees the child, the Son of God. And he says, I can die in peace now. I've seen the light. I've seen God that you promised in Exodus not to take your glory away from the people. I've seen it now. I can die in peace. Some people see it, some people don't. That's what John says. Some people couldn't comprehend it. Jesus is the light. He is the Shekinah of God. He and the Father are witnesses. That's what Jesus says. If you want a witness, I got two. Me and God. Me and my Father. That's it. That's all you need. Two. He is the glory of God in the flesh. Matthew chapter 17 talks of another occasion where people got to see this Shekinah, the glory of God. And after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John and his brother, led them to a high mountain by themselves, and He was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and His clothes became white as a light, the glory of God. Well, they'd seen it. They were witnesses. They got a glimpse. Tim, I went to movies last night, and I'm old, and I like a certain seat in the theater. Okay, I like to sit along the rail, so I can put my feet up. Anyone else? Rail sitters? Oh yeah, that's my favorite place. Yeah, I'm not. Some of you are younger than me. And so we were, and they were backed up out the door. And I thought, man, we're not going to get a good seat. We're not going to get a good seat. We're not going to get a good seat. I get a little anxious. We were sort of pushing it like that. But she got in line, got the popcorn. I got her tickets like that. Well, we got the seat because maybe we went to stuff. There's like 2 people in there. We went in there. It's like, well, where is everybody? Everybody's watching American Sniper, but or what was the other thing for kids movie? There were some kids maybe going on too. There was a bunch of people. Huh? Yeah, Paddington. Yeah, that was probably in the Ride Museum. Yeah, something else going. But anyways, I like the previews. I do. I'm a person who likes the previews. And sometimes that's all I'm going to watch of that movie is a preview, because some movies, that's all that was good, was the preview. Ever seen that? So, and sometimes a preview will tell me another movie I want to watch. Which is, and there was a movie last night that was previewed that we hadn't seen the first one, so we went home last night and watched the first one. So we're ready to see the second one. So I like the previews. What these guys saw was a preview. Upcoming attraction. The thing yet to be seen. They got a preview. What are they described as? Light. The light of the world. The glory of God. The Shekinah, the presence of God. We learned this song, right? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine. We learned it. One of the first songs we learned. We know it. It's an important song to know. Because Jesus said in verse 12, not only am I the light of the world, and not only those who follow me will not walk in darkness, but they will have the light of life. Beautiful words in that sentence. Beautiful words. Light and oh, beautiful. But maybe the most powerful word is that what you have. As a child of God, you have the light of the world. It's not what you're going to get. It's not what you may earn. It's what you have. You have the light of life. And all your worldly assets that you have. If you were to inventory everything that you own, nothing compares to having the light of the world. Amen? Jesus says, what happens if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? You have nothing. So if everything that you own, and so if you're sitting here this morning and you're a child of God, when it comes tax time, you better get nervous. Because if they really measure your true assets, you couldn't pay it, right? Declare your assets this year, child of God. What's it worth? There ain't that much money. But you have the light of life. Is there any more precious promise? than to know that? Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 14, you are the light of the world, a city that cannot be hidden. You are it. I know sometimes you look in the mirror and say, oh, this is the best it gets. Yeah, you're it. Not that you create light, but that you reflect light. A few years ago, we had a family retreat down at the Christian camp, High Lake. Thank you, High Lake. Had a senior moment there. High Lake. And it was a full moon that night. And I encourage everyone just to go out and look at the full moon, understanding as big and bright and beautiful as that moon was, it's just reflecting the light of the sun. That's all it is. It looks like, you can. It was pretty light recently one night, and our dog was excited because he could see outside at night. Really, it's just reflecting the light, and that's what we're light reflectors. We're like the moon to the sun. We're light reflecting of the sun. But we are the light of the world. Philippians chapter 2, verse 14, 15, Paul says this, do all things without complaining and disputing. That's worth repeating. Do all things. Now, what's in all things? Everything. Without complaining, disputing. Oh, does he really mean that? Yeah, he really means that. Okay, so kids, when they say, make your bed, do your homework, brush your teeth, go to bed, yeah, that's in that too. Yeah. Husbands, when wife says, honey, can you? Yeah, that's in that too. Yeah. When the elder calls upon the church to engage and perform in ministry, yeah, that's in that too. Yeah. When that person gets on your last nerve, yes, that's in that too. It's do all things without complaining and disputing. That you may become blameless and harmless children of God without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. Wow. Your light. When you turn the news on and see how broken the world is and how perverse it is, you're the light. You're the solution. You're the hope. You're the light of the world. The question, I guess, is if Jesus is your light, do you trust Him to be your guiding light? And using the imagery of Jesus being the Shekinah, the glory of God, what they experienced in the wilderness, what they saw around the tabernacle, what led them in the wilderness, we need to understand a little bit about how that worked. The light did not follow them. It isn't like they said, well, it's time to pick up and move. And pack your tents, get your camels, and let's go. And the light followed them. Actually, the light led them. And what was really interesting about that, when you read about it, in Numbers chapter 9, verse 15 through 22, it says, they did not move unless it moved. They didn't. So, they get up in the morning. Oh, it's still there. They go to bed at night. Well, it's still there. But when it moved, guess what? Honey, pack up the tent. Let's go. It's moving. And they followed it. In fact, verse 22 says, whether it was 2 days, a month, a year, that the cloud remained above the tabernacle, the children of Israel would remain encamped and not journey. But it wasn't taken up, they would journey. Can you imagine? Some of you who like everything planned, whoo, that may be hard for you. Okay, but can you imagine? You didn't know. It could be 2 days. Whoop, time to go again. It could be a month. It could even be a year. And it stayed. but they followed it. And I guess the implication is, if Jesus is the light of the world and He is your light and you have this light, are you willing to be patient with Him? Are you willing to wait on Him? Does He move fast enough for you? Do you sometimes design your life and plan your life without consulting Him? Part of Him being your guiding light is that you have to be patient enough to live on God's schedule. You see, some of you remember it. Some of you have done it. Some of us could remember people talking about it. But there was a time when you got up in the morning and someone had to get some water. So you ran to the spring or the well. And someone had to get some kindling and put some kindling in the stove and get it lit. And then add some more fire to it. And get that stove beginning getting hot. And then you had to take some flour out. And you took some lard out. And you took some buttermilk out. And you didn't have self-rising flour, so you couldn't leave out your leavening agent. You had to put some soda in it, or baking powder, and you mixed that up, and you rolled that out, or you made them cat head biscuits, and you put them in a pan, and you did it that way, and then everything else had to be done. And that took a little bit of time, and that was called breakfast. Okay? And we can't wait 67 seconds for an egg white muffin to heat up and think that, well, I'm running, I got to get out the door. We want it now. If it's not the speed of light, it's not fast enough. Yeah. God forbid that we asked our computer something like, what's the origin of the word doofus? I just came out of the old song. That was pretty funny. And it takes more than 2 seconds. What's wrong with this slow computer? And there was a time when you had to go to the library and pull books off the shelf and look that up. We have no patience for anything anymore. We want it, and we want it now. Hardly a week goes by without my wife saying, I hate packaging, because she wants it right now. And all those blister packs and stuff like that. Some of you know what I'm talking about. We're the same way spiritually. I want to be this serene Christian who never has a worry or a thought. And I wanted to have just happiness and blissful and joy all day long. And I just want sunshine on my shoulders. And I want to walk on rainbows. And I want it, and I want it now. Well, God, I prayed for it. You're supposed to give it to me now. You don't work that way. I don't think it ever worked that way. If it did, it was a miraculous gift of the Holy Spirit, right? To speak languages without having the Rosetta Stone software to go with it. Right? We have to wait on the Lord. What's Isaiah say? Those who wait on the Lord, He shall renew those strengths. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not go weary. They will walk and not faint. You see, we have to learn to do that. Have you ever heard of a disorder called seasonal affective disorder? Yeah, right. The middle of winter, ask that question. Duh. Yeah. It's a real disorder. For some people, when the days get shorter and they're not exposed enough to natural light, they get depressed. We know now there's a neurochemical balance that takes place. You have some things going on there. You're not getting enough serotonin. And what really interesting is exposing you to light will change that. I worked with a psychiatrist one time in her practice, and she converted all the fluorescent fixtures into her office into full spectrum lights. So all of her 4 bulb fixtures had full spectrum lights. And I said, "Are we growing marijuana now?" I didn't know, because that's the same thing you grow marijuana with. So, but she said, "No, it's for my seasonal affective disorder." And I said, "Okay, I'm good with it." In fact, we were at Essex last night, and they had these little boxes, these little light boxes you could purchase, and they had full spectrum lights in it, something like that. So exposing yourself to more daylight tends to help that. So very often, if I have a client that seems depressed this time of year, I'll ask them this question: would going to the beach make you feel better? They say, "Yes, it would." Then they have seasonal affective disorder. I say, "No, it wouldn't. They're probably majorly depressed." So it's a real thing. And because of seasonal affective disorder, is because of not enough exposure to sunlight. But I say spiritually, I don't know what we'd call the spiritual equivalent to it, but I think there's people who experience not enough exposure to the sunlight, the S-O-N light. And I really do think that's a spiritual malady, that some people really are not exposed enough to the light of the world, and because of that, they're struggling. They're getting impatient with Jesus, so they go out on their own. They make plans without waiting on God. Now, sometimes it's really, really hard to do that waiting stuff, but His blessings do not come with suffering. Remember us the Transfiguration? They got the preview of things to come. Revelation chapter 22 is a thing to come. That's what we who are children of God have to look forward to. There should be no light there. They need no lamp, nor light of the sun, for the Lord God gives them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. That Sunday morning, or that Sunday, I don't know sure it was morning or afternoon by that time. Maybe it was the evening, and they just lit the lamps. And Jesus says, "I'm the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but have light." That was a great promise. One of the greatest things we can say is that we can extend that same offer today. If you confess Jesus your Savior and you're buried with Him in baptism, guess what? You have light. If not, you're in darkness. Now, the scary part is that if you keep putting that off, you keep snuffing that light out, you keep keeping it from shining into your heart and into your life, it can be darkened. To the saddest words in the English language: too late. If you're here this morning, don't let that be ever said about you. Walk in the light. Embrace the light. If you need assistance, encouragement, prayer on your behalf, whatever your need are this morning, won't you come as Brother Steve leads us in a song?